My earliest favourite game of all time was Scalar for the PlayStation 2. It's an action-adventure platformer where you play as a kid turned into a lizard thrust into a world filled with monsters. Over the course of the game, you unlock new forms to shapeshift into to beat enemies and solve puzzles, and I thought that was just the coolest thing ever. After this, it was Pokemon Diamond on the Nintendo DS. This was my first Pokemon game, and though I was joining the series a little bit late, I loved the idea of Pokemon so much that me and my friend would talk about how we could invent real-life Pokemon that evolve over their lifetimes. Needless to say, we didn't do that for various ethical, scientific, and of course me being too dumb reasons. After this, it was Skyrim, then Minecraft, then Overwatch, Red Dead Redemption 2, and so on, all the way up until today, where my favourite game of all time is currently Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Because I don't think it won enough awards. These games act as pillars in my gaming career, so to speak. I have played many more games than just this select few, but these are the ones I remember the most clearly when I look back on this hobby that's had me in a chokehold for practically my entire life. The other games may not be entirely forgotten, but they certainly fade into obscurity over time, and it takes a little bit more effort on one of those "oh hell yeah, I used to love that game" moments for me to remember. This never really bothered me since I just played games and didn't really think too much about them. But as I've become older, wiser, and more pretentious, a problem has started to make itself known to me. I now notice these pillars a whole lot more. I can tell when I'm playing something that will stay with me for the rest of my life, and whilst that is great as I can take the extra time to enjoy them, it also means I'm noticing something else. I know when I'm playing a game that will become a pillar, but that also means that I know when I'm playing something that won't. When I'm playing one of the games that will live in between, something that I will likely forget in a few years, months, or even weeks. Something that may be good or even great, but just not quite great enough to cement itself a permanent place in my memory like those who came before. And that series of thoughts has made me wonder, are these games really not good enough, or am I projecting that onto them because I'm still stuck on the last pillar? Am I literally putting these games on a pedestal and causing others to fail before I even give them a real chance? I want to stop doing this, but in order to do that, I'm going to tell you a story of how my most recent pillar has raised the bar to near unreachable levels for those who come after. Okay, yeah, we get it. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 rocks and is my current pillar. Let's not dwell on that too much. Instead, let's have a look at what happened in the immediate aftermath of finishing the game. I came back to finish some games I'd already started, like Yakuzo 0 and Metroid Prime Remastered, and whilst they, in my subjective opinion, didn't compare to it, I'd already partially formed those opinions before I knew Clair Obscur was going to be something so special to me. Yakuzo I'd started about a month before, and my notes from when I completed it match how I felt then. Metroid Prime Remastered I actually started a little bit afterwards, but even from those first few hours, I knew this was something I was going to like and not love. However, from the first moments of hearing about the altars, I knew it was going to be something special. The setup for the game could not be simpler. Jan finds himself on an alien world and is the sole survivor aboard his base. The problem is, he's just a single person with a single skill set, and this base requires a range of skill sets to operate. So unless he does something, he's also going to die here. The only choice he has is to use the onboard quantum computer to create different versions of himself that have the skill sets required to survive. From just hearing about this, the concept grabbed me immediately. The idea of looking at the path of your life and seeing who you would be if you had done things differently is something I find endlessly fascinating no matter how many times I see it. Stepping outside of ourselves and viewing our lives as an external observer is something not possible outside of fiction. And I don't think anyone could really say that the idea isn't at least a little bit tempting. But when you access the quantum computer and read the story of Jan's life, it's nothing all that extraordinary. In fact, no matter how you measure fulfillment or success, his life falls towards the lower end. He grew up with an abusive father, abandoned his mother on her deathbed, and broke up with his longtime partner mainly due to his own insecurity. He's not a born hero. He's just a guy who took a job because he really didn't feel like he had many other options, and is now stuck in a fight for his life on a planet he barely understands. The way he creates these alters of himself is by changing key decisions he made in his life. Most that you can alter result in that version of himself achieving something that he never did. They stuck around and helped his mother towards the end of her life, they got over their ego and made their marriage work, while they finished university and became a person of note. You might assume that even with all of his faults, original Yan would be the hero and all other versions would be lacking something that he doesn't. But in fact, he's the least capable of them all. He can do most jobs at a passable level, but he has no specialist skills or knowledge and is in charge by default rather than anything tangible. Some games may gloss over this, but the alters in-game directly confront him. They ask why they should do what he says when he plucked them from their lives and brought them into a world where their loved ones do not exist, all to bail him out of certain doom. Beyond the obvious, if they... Will you lot shut up? I'm trying to talk to these people. Beyond the obvious, if they don't help, they'll all die, these conversations and confrontations between the alters and Yan are endlessly enthralling. Finding common ground with yourself sounds easy, but it leads to many difficult topics. Why didn't you stand up to dad? Why did you drop out of college? Why didn't you fight for your marriage? Initially, nothing he says can adequately answer these questions, but eventually through earning their trust with comforts, gifts and long conversations, the others warm up to him, and he even begins to learn from them. Seeing how a single decision can affect the entire course of your life is already a fascinating concept. Speaking to those versions of yourself from the new lives even more so. But learning from them, and not going back to fix past mistakes, but changing and growing so that they don't keep happening, is beyond anything I've really seen in fiction. Yan has quite possibly the most literal journey of self-reflection you can find as he grows from these other versions of himself that didn't make the same mistakes he did and learns to be better because of it. Don't get me wrong, no version of Yan is perfect. The technician may have had the strength to stand up to his abusive father, but he's stubborn and resents what Yan did without his permission. The scientist is extremely intelligent and dedicated to working out how to escape this planet, but is arrogant and refuses to take the feelings of anyone into account. Yan isn't learning from some perfect version of himself, he's getting to know himself through the best parts of his imperfect selves. The story of the game is not one of survival, it's one of self-discovery, self-forgiveness, and just about every other introspective thought you can imagine. Yan grows to know himself and himselves completely, and to me, that was far more compelling than how he'll escape a planet. There are, however, ways to tell a story that use no dialogue or characters at all. Stories woven into the very fabric of the world you find yourself in. One such world is A Lands Between from Elden Ring, and the story being told is that of an Armageddon that has long since come to pass. When you think of post-apocalypse settings, you probably think of something like Fallout. A vast wasteland filled with mutants in all shapes and sizes, the occasional group of humans either trying their best to hold on to some sense of civilization or destroy the last remnants of it altogether. Whilst you could argue that The Lands Between contains some of these aspects, it's also a world filled with life. On the surface, it doesn't look like a place that has faced its end. It's only when you look a little closer that you start to see the signs of what came before. I'm going to preface all of this by saying that I do not know very much about the factual lore of Elden Ring. I've played the game once, watched a couple of videos summarizing the story, but I'm nothing remotely close to an expert on the game. With that said, The Lands Between are so rich in visual and environmental storytelling that even without the lore to fall back on, you can build up a story of what happened here without too much trouble. Your initial journey from the first steps to Stormvale Castle's gates take you through several layers of ruined civilization and fortifications. The remnants of a church and other buildings litter the cliffside, barely any of it standing taller than a few feet off the ground. A once temporary camp is now all that remains of whatever this place was, still patrolled by soldiers long after the call of duty has rung to silence. They sit as if waiting for their final stand that never came, instead attacking anything that comes close, fiercely defending what remains of their home. Beyond the last vestiges of civilization, the terrain itself is jagged and chaotic. Spiked rocks and sudden cliffs make up much of the landscape, requiring careful consideration to navigate. It's as if the land itself has been torn apart and thrown back together a dozen times over. This makes it simultaneously nearly impossible to find your bearings or travel directly towards your goal, whilst also ensuring each and every step you take is memorable should you need to find your way back. Entering this area again, I feel like I'm visiting somewhere that used to be my hometown. If you asked me for directions or to draw on the map, I'd be hopeless. However, once my feet touch the ground and I wander a while through the forest of protruding rocks and ruins, I know how to find my way home. It's a strangely comforting feeling to know a place to such a degree, and yet still feel so lost. The area is also visibly ravaged by time. Beyond the destruction of anything resembling a structure, foliage has invaded every surface with moss and vines forcing their way into anything left standing. Vegetation has fused what remains to the earth, as if trapping them from ever being truly gone. Nothing here is maintained or upkept. The world has simply been left to rot. Exploring this place for the first time truly feels like entering a land untouched for eons, as if you are the first person to set foot here since the calamity, and your very presence is waking up the land itself and all of its inhabitants. It makes you feel simultaneously significant and insignificant. You may be entering a region where no one has in an age, but this place is not made for you, and it will pull no punches when teaching you this. Upon reaching the castle gates, you are met with a once imposing structure now in a state of desperate disrepair. The devastation that befell the surrounding area did not leave the main structure unscathed. Large gashes have been taken out of the exterior walls, as if something truly gigantic has clawed chunks out of the castle itself. And I couldn't help but wonder what could possibly be that big, and if it was still out there. Plant life has again permeated through the castle both inside and out. Breaches in exterior walls are now filled with dense thickets of thorns, and once immaculate floors are now hidden beneath an endless maze of growth. The people, if you can even call them that anymore, are still standing at the ready for an attack that is never coming. Guards stand at attention behind barricades, and they man siege equipment, waiting for their moment to strike. When forced to fight back, I almost feel bad. They are trapped in an endless duty to a kingdom lost to time, their own bodies corrupt and deformed by age or dark magic. They're no longer soldiers, just husks, bound in armour. Beyond the visuals, the soundtrack that accompanies these two areas reinforces the perpetual anxiety of the area and its inhabitants. Limgrave encapsulates this with a constant, unnerving climb. It's reminiscent of the rising tension you might see in a horror film just before the scare. When combined with the rest of the track, it fills you with this feeling of failure, like this music is playing at the site of a great loss, and there is nothing left to be done. Everyone and everything left in the area wallows in this collective tragedy, knowing that they have no hope and can never get it back. Which is quite a bold vibe for the literal starting area of your game. Stormvale Castle shares in this feeling of defeat. The constant climb has been blocked out by the castle walls, but the pain has seeped its way inside. It may be in a more regal package with richer, more defined notes, but that same hopelessness is present throughout, as if each note is another soul trapped somewhere within, crying out in desperation for an end that will not come. Toward the end of the track, you also have these sinister undertones, as if something is lurking just out of sight, waiting to drag you down into that same hopeless defeat. In these two relatively small areas, you already learn so much about the wider world, and much of it comes from letting your surroundings themselves tell you a story. I don't know about you, but I think I much prefer that to an endless wall of text. Metaphor Refantazio is a game with no shortage of walls of text, but that's not what I want to talk about. The gameplay of Metaphor is broken up into two halves. Half one is combat. Over the course of 60 or so hours, you will enter all kinds of dungeons in search of loot, bounties, or main story progress, depending on your preference. These dungeons are filled with all kinds of enemies, and the way you initiate combat and how that combat works is one of the deepest aspects of the game. When exploring an area, enemies appear almost everywhere. You can start battling these at any time by simply starting a squad battle. This instantly sends you into turn-based combat and is by far the safest and easiest way to start a fight and ensure you can take your first turn. However, you can also choose to attack enemies in the overworld, and depending on their strength, this does a number of things. For much weaker enemies, it allows you to instantly take them down and receive any experience, money, and items in seconds, instead of having to go through several loading screens, expending time and resources to face them in turn-based combat. For stronger enemies, you instead have to break their stamina bar, at which point they'll become stunned and you can instantly engage them in turn-based combat, but you'll also deal a large amount of damage with your opening attack, and all enemies will be stunned, giving you the potential to get multiple turns for free and take enemies out before they even have a chance to try and hit you. However, in the overworld, enemies will still fight back, and if they can hit you even a single time, you are thrust straight into an ambush where all enemies get to attack before you can even take a turn. Since this is primarily against more powerful enemies, this can result in a pretty dire situation or even an instant loss depending on the fight. It's a great system of risk versus reward where the option to safely enter battle is always readily available, but if you are willing to try, you can make the ensuing combat a lot more in your favour. I always felt nervous attacking some new enemies, chipping away at their stamina and dodging their attacks at the last second, making what could be repetitive standard issue turn-based RPG battles into something a lot more engaging. I wasn't forced to play in any particular way, I was simply given the option to make things a little more interesting. The turn-based combat itself is also anything but standard issue. Of course, you have the actual turns along with attacks, guards and abilities that most games in the genre include. However, the real thing setting this game apart is the archetype system. Each character in your party can take on the power of a large number of archetypes. Everyone comes with its own weapon type, preferred stats and abilities, and more. This allows you to tailor each of your party members to the enemies that you are facing. If you are battling something weak to fire, then it may be worth swapping over to the mage to cast fire spells. If the enemy casts stat boosts to empower itself, then the faker is here to wipe them out and bring it back down to earth. Almost every single enemy in the game has certain damage types that they will be weak to, certain abilities that you can choose to counter, and this all encourages you to never stick with one playstyle for too long. Usually in games, your characters have their set playstyle and you stick to that. You may be able to build them over the course of the game, but rarely are you jumping so regularly between playstyles and abilities. Metaphor turns this on its head and makes swapping between these archetypes not just an option, but the only real way to succeed. Certain fights are borderline impossible without swapping your team around, and learning how to turn every fight to your advantage never really gets boring, even towards the back end of that 60 or so hours. This space for so much creativity and personal choice makes Metaphor's combat system one of my favourites that have been in an RPG. Before every dungeon or boss, I would prepare my team and build them around taking on the current threat. I was planning out the roles that everyone would take and how they would fit into the greater whole. It gave me a similar feeling to playing The Witcher 3, where I would learn everything I could about the monster I was hunting, collect resources and ingredients to create oils, potions and other extras to give myself an edge during combat. It immerses you in the action in a very direct way by rewarding you for your preparedness and punishing you if you get careless. I haven't even mentioned the synthesis abilities, which require you to have 2 or more archetypes in your party at the same time. These take 2 or more turns to use, but can be devastatingly powerful and turn the tide of battle in your favour. I also forgot to mention that upon landing either a critical attack or hitting an enemy's weakness, your turns are refunded, so you can take even more turns and really hit enemies hard. Yes, this system is great. But I did say it's only one half of the gameplay. The other half is made up of lots and lots and lots of talking. Each archetype tree is linked to a certain character you meet over the course of the game. To increase the power of these archetypes and unlock new ones, you need to increase your bond with these characters by talking to them, going on certain quests, and increasing various stats to help them out. It essentially gamifies making friends, which is pretty cool, but also comes at the cost of a bit of a disconnect to the player. For instance, I really like Hulkenberg. No prizes for guessing why. She's a tall lady with red hair who wants to eat everything she sees, and honestly it's just nice to have some representation. Anyway, she's probably my favourite companion, however her archetype tree, at least early on, wasn't all that powerful or interesting. She's the knight, so has a lot of abilities focused on tanking damage and protecting the team, which is really great later on, but early just meant I had someone who did very little damage. This meant that when choosing who to spend time with, I could go with the character I like, who I actually want to learn about, or I could go for someone who I may not like as much but has some very strong archetypes and upgrades. I will say that towards the end of the game, this system really does come into its own, as the endgame archetypes are all super powerful, so it was nice to see my favourites reach their full potential nice and early. However, until that point, I felt very lukewarm about the whole system. I'd simply grind companion quests to make them more powerful, and never really paid much attention to what they talked about. Now it could be that this system slightly encourages this disconnect, or it could be that the conversation in this game is done primarily through lots and lots and lots, and I mean a lot of text boxes with no voice acting and stationary camera shots. Very rarely is there voice acting, rarer still is there an actual animated cutscene, and even rarer still you have these anime style animations which do rock and I get why there aren't more, but I digress. All of this added up meant that I loved unlocking new archetypes and experimenting with them in combat and min-maxing my party to take out enemies as fast as possible, but I also sat there blitzing through conversations, getting the gist and skimming through, rather than letting myself sink into this world and really get to know everyone in it. And this sensation of being able to jump with both feet into something has affected all 3 games I've talked about today. I've played all of them through to the end and then some. Nearly 150 hours combined have been poured into these games, and yet they're just not pillars for me. They're just not. Clair, Obscur, Expedition 33, and nothing ever can be. I think for most people, our taste in games is something that evolves over time. The genres, styles, and even lengths of games we like changes, both as we become older, but also as we explore new things and discover new ways to enjoy this hobby. When I play a game that goes on to become a pillar, I believe it drastically changes the shape of my taste to essentially be a near perfect cutout of that game, doubly so when it's something that I don't feel like I'm ready to say goodbye to. When I completed Expedition 33, I was not even remotely close to being ready to say goodbye. I delayed the inevitable by completing every single achievement and spent 8 hours bashing my head against the same boss just so I wouldn't have to leave it behind. I knew I was never going to be able to play this game for the first time, and the very idea of that broke me. Put simply, I wanted more, and so my taste in games became Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I wanted a gripping story with a beautiful existential premise that made the most of every interaction no matter how small. I wanted a game that told me as much from the world design and soundtrack as it did the dialogue and exposition. I wanted a turn-based RPG that gave me the freedom to play how I want and take as many risks as I was comfortable with to give myself an edge. And I wanted all of this in a single, perfect game. In short, I wanted something that outside of my subjective view of Expedition 33 did not exist. Nothing I played afterwards would have satisfied my needs, and so of course, each of these 3 games fell short. Each of them had an aspect or more that I was looking for, but their failure to contain the full package isn't on them for being bad games, it's just that I played them at the wrong time and in the wrong headspace. And that realization has made me wonder, would I have liked these games more if I had played them first or waited until later? The comparison is in my mind before I even hit play, and wondering how each new game will stack up to my pillar, doubting that they'll ever get close before they even have a chance to try. Would a lack of comparison have given them more of a chance at becoming a pillar, or at least getting closer? It's pointless to ask as I can never really know, but the question still paralyzes me with this constant feeling that I'm not enjoying something as much as I could, or even should be. Like a lot of you, my family and I just celebrated Christmas. We're not religious, but every year we get together, buy each other gifts, try to surprise each other, and spend the day eating great food, drinking a little bit too much, and briefly forgetting about everything else going on in our lives. I was talking to my partner in late December, and she said that it doesn't feel like Christmas when you were a kid. I agreed because, yeah, when you're older, the magic is gone, and Christmas is a little bit more stressful. You have to decorate your own home, figure out what people want, and spend the money to get it for them. You can't just walk downstairs after waking your parents up at 5 in the morning to see if Santa has been anymore. If you compare the two, it doesn't even seem like a competition, and whilst that may be somewhat true, I don't think it tells the whole story. That childhood wonder and feeling of magic and mad excitement is gone, and in all likelihood it will never come back. These days I tell my parents directly things that I need, and in the case of this year it was mostly a bunch of trays for cooking. I do really like my new trays, don't get me wrong. If you're watching this, Mum and Dad, love you lots, and I really appreciate the gifts. But comparing that to how excited I got for a new Action Man or video game when I was a kid, it's not even a contest. But whilst that magic may no longer be here, there is another kind. They also got me some Chef Whites, which is just hilarious, and by far the gift that's been most talked about. We can still surprise each other in little fun ways that may seem less exciting on the surface, but are no less precious in the moment. I got to help cook some parts of Christmas dinner. My dad and I have already been texting about how to improve it for next year. I got to spend my first Christmas as myself without having to hide from my family. And honestly, that tops any unexpected gift or magical story of some fat guy and some reindeer. I could sit here and compare each Christmas to the one before and wallow in the fact that I'll never be a kid again and feel as each year brings me closer to the inevitable oblivion. Or I can just enjoy each one as best I can and find new ways to keep things magical. Every year might not be the greatest Christmas I've ever had, but that doesn't make them any less special. And when it comes to games, I think I need to figure out how to take that same approach. So what do? How do I stop comparing games to everything I've played before and allow myself to just enjoy each game for what they are? Well, I don't think I can. I'm sure that's probably not what you were hoping for, but I really think it's true. To me, nothing ever will be Clair Obscur, and I think I just need to be okay with that. I even wrote in my notes after playing that I'm not sure how anyone will top this anytime soon, but I can't wait to see them try. And yes, that is actually what I wrote after completing Baldur's Gate 3. I guess that even if the comparison never stops happening, then other games can still punch through and become something special. In fact, even games that fit the exact same taste as the last one can be just as good, if not better. As I've written this video, I've started to realize that it's really hard to talk about this problem because I don't actually think it's real. Okay, yes, I do compare games to my current favorite because that's just how the human brain works. But what I mean is, I don't think it stops me from enjoying other things. Maybe immediately afterwards, I'm a little less likely to get attached to something new, but I have plenty of palate cleanser games that fit that gap perfectly. But beyond that, there really is nothing stopping something new from going the distance and becoming a pillar outside of how much I love it. I've talked about 3 of the games I've played since completing Expedition 33, but I haven't mentioned the 42 other games I've also played and the handful that really made an impact. Life is Strange is now one of my favourite stories in all of gaming, Expedition 33 included. Signalis has gone from something I played once and forgot about to something I still think about and unpack to this day. Metro Awakening is one of the greatest VR games I've ever played, and almost certainly the most scared I've been since playing Silent Hill 2. I could go on, but the point I'm trying to make is that even though not all of these games will become true pillars that I remember until the day I die, I wouldn't trade the time I spent with any of them for the world. I love the feeling of starting a new game, meeting its characters, exploring its world, and understanding its systems and mechanics. I've been playing video games for as long as I can remember, and I can honestly say that it is no less magical now than it was when I was too young to remember how old I was, playing Link's Awakening on my dad's Game Boy. Oh, hey. Hi there. I get that having the conclusion to this video be that the power was inside of us all along is kind of cliched, but I don't know what to tell you. It really is how I feel. I think comparison is fine, but at the end of the day, you're either going to enjoy playing a game and remember it for a long time, or you're not, regardless of how it compares to everything else. These pillars are only as important as I allow them to be, and a game failing to become one doesn't make it any less special to me. If you look at my backlog, yeah, I have a backlog, link in the description, no big deal, but check it out. You'll see that I play and love plenty of games and even have some that are on my Mount Olympus that may not even be pillars. I mentioned Life is Strange, and that is absolutely one of my favorite games I've played in recent memory, and it's not a pillar because, I don't know, it just isn't. Just play some video games, allow yourself to enjoy them, and if you don't feel yourself sinking into them like a warm bath on a cold day, that doesn't mean they're not worth your time. It just makes the games where you do even more special. I want you to know, by the way, that this isn't like, I'm not having to post. This is my dad's actual Game Boy that now sits on my shelf, and I put batteries in it, and it's got the actual link there. I'll turn it off because it's making a lot of noise. Yeah. It's my dad's actual Game Boy that works. It mostly works. The screen thing does kind of fall off, but it works. I put batteries in it. It works, and then that's my actual. That's it. That's the one. Link's Awakening. Good game. One of my favorite Zeldas. Yeah, I'm probably just going to put this in at the end as like a blooper thing. Enjoy. Hope you enjoyed the video.